Um, this is about the 90s. When the 90s was happening, I was pretty much a kid, so I wasn't exactly a teen yet. But when the 90s were around, I still remember it. A very great decade. A decade when basically grunge said bye-bye to all the flashy kids, and all those snot-nosed, preppy, glammy kids, or whatever they were called. And it also said goodbye to the theatricality of rock and roll. Grunge made even the lowest denominator of general culture, the guy who generally didn't wear the likable fashions that most people thought was just well, they got the last laugh, saying, well, look, we're in pop culture now, bye-bye. Anyways, but after that, of course, grunge faded out because Kurt committed suicide, obviously, and along came goth, and you know how that happens. First the Crow, then Manson, even though Manson isn't goth. But one other culture, actually not really culture, but it's a trend that came back, is the skater culture. And it's still alive today, but let's just say they had some more bright, cheerful fashions back in the 90s. They wore khakis, bright colored shirts, backwards caps, and they weren't all blingy like they are today, or seemingly today. They also wore Converse shoes. See, Converse was more of a skater thing. It wasn't so much of a punk thing. Maybe it was a pop punk or all punk thing, but it definitely wasn't a punk rock thing. They think Converse is for emos, or for other pop rock kids, but it's definitely not for them. But skater culture still embraces Converse shoes because it's a hallmark in skater culture. Khaki cargos is also a hallmark in skater culture, but some more baggies than otherwise. Speaking of baggies became a sort of fad for guys, much like well, I can't recall what the other fads are called. But for girls, there was skirts, and then there was the palm hair things that Britney Spears introduced. And yes, skirts was the best way to deceive the biggest horn dog who thinks he was going to get some. Definitely not. Anyways. And of course, people didn't wear all these big-ass gay-looking sunglasses back then. But of course, oh yeah, the butterfly clips, I almost forgot about those. But anyways, those were another sort of fad, I think. But that was basically so that girls could seemingly get some sort of status of some sort, whatever it was. Backwards caps, that was a trend. Khaki. Anyways, as I mentioned, the khaki cargo and backwards caps and that stuff. Well, surfing also came back in the 90s, luckily. And that is one of the biggest hallmarks of America. And there's also, well, movies were very good. I'll just put it that way. Braveheart, The Crow, Austin Powers, Dragonheart, you name it. Good stuff. Starship Troopers, doesn't matter. Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Dams, all sorts of good stuff. Cartoons, kids were not without one. Cartoons were very good. There was Pinky and the Brain, there was Animaniacs, Freakazoid. Disney was very good in its animation at that time. Yes, Aladdin, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast. Disney's glory days still going. just before they entered the conforming wars. And let's see, our superhero cartoons weren't done by cheap, undergraded animation like they are nowadays. And the animes were pretty good also, and they weren't very cheaply animated either. They were done very well, even though they kind of juiced them up to more of a theatrical 3D sort of thing. Anyways, aside the cartoons and that, there was also the shows. There was Roswell, the Xena Warrior Princess, The Adventures of Hercules. There was Walker Texas Ranger, and for the sitcoms there was Friends and stuff like that. Let's just say we had good shows and good sitcoms and stuff like that. Still some Star Trek going, still some other shows going. And of course we had one show for every type of culture, for everybody. The music was also good. Alternative rock, redeemed rock and roll from the terrible consequence of the 80s. And there's also alternative in many directions: country, rap, hip-hop, pop, any particular area. You didn't have to think of one specific area. Every area was covered in alternative. I can't say really much else, but I'm basically naming the greatest things about the 90s. Let's just say there was a high amount of spirited optimism during that time, and the entertainment was really great, but so was the scenes and trends and stuff. I mean, pop culture was irrelevant, fashion was irrelevant, but hey, at least fashion was not just some super flashy stuff that they came out with in the 80s. It was basically simple, and it was worthwhile wearing out in public or anything. It was fairly good fashion for its time. But the 90s is one epic decade, never to be forgotten, no matter what. So even as this decade shall end, it shall end in infamy. The 90s shall always be remembered as the golden 90s.